Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. My name is Clint.
And I'm Jacob.
And we are here on our 32nd episode of 2019. Racing is done in Ohio, but they're still racing in California.
Oh, yeah. I mean, why not race all year in California if it's warm?
Yeah, you could just get out there and enjoy the weather like we're going to be missing here for the next few months.
I know. It's cold, and I don't like it.
We do appreciate everyone tuning in, and we want to wish you and your families a happy Thanksgiving as we are posting here on Thanksgiving Day. Happy holidays, and we hope that everything's going well with you and your family and enjoying your meals.
And if you're not enjoying your family, you can just listen to the podcast and get away from your family or your in-laws or whoever you need to get away from.
Right. You can finish listening to this episode, and then you can go backwards and listen to one of the 31 other episodes, including Mario Andretti last week or Drew Brenner the week before that, or any of the other drivers or crew members that we've talked to.
Exactly.
As always, we're coming to you from the home of the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast in the St. Pete District Studios, downtown Mansfield. St. Pete District Studios is a full-service recording studio that can meet any of your recording needs. Rob will get you in and get you taken care of. Rock and roll, gospel, jazz, opera, heavy metal, you name it, they'll record it. Even commercial or podcast needs. Rob has clearly made major improvements to the sound of the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast, and we want to share that with you as well. So for booking, email Rob at robinrecorder@gmail.com or find them on Facebook at St. Pete District Studios. So, Jacob, let's talk about what was going on in California really quick this past week.
All right. So they had the Hangtown 100, the inaugural Hangtown 100, I believe. They probably had 55-ish midgets both nights with the USAC guys. There were some other, they call them the focus midgets. I'm not sure what the specs were on that, but they were a separate division. And I know nothing about them. So we'll just kind of focus on the USAC boys. But it was a 2-day event with points leading into Wednesday's finale. Gio Selzy picked up his first USAC midget win Tuesday night, kind of surprised everyone, really. And then Wednesday night, it was Kyle Larson taking home, I believe, $12,000 for the race win. And then he picked up the points win as well, and I believe that was an extra $20,000. So Larson came home with $32,000 in his 1K midget. It was actually a 100-lap feature as well, which a 100-lap midget feature hasn't been done in a long time. So it was really cool to see that down at Placerville. So we had Larson in first, Christopher Bell second. Just kind of running through some other notable names. Dylan Welch was sixth, for only running very limited midget schedule. He goes out and finishes sixth with the best. Tyler Courtney finished eighth. He finished second in the USAC sprint car points. And then with his finish of eighth, I believe he won the midget championship before Turkey Night Grand Prix coming up here this week. Some other notables. We had Thomas Meserol, former guest on the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. He finished 17th. And then Buddy Kofoid came around and finished 18th from the C-Main, which is pretty cool to see. Or I believe he came from the C-Main. But, and yeah, we had Rico finishing 26th. I think he got upside down. Brad Sweet, the Outlaw champion, finished 25th. And the other really kind of big notable name was Ricky Stenhouse Jr., finishing in 28th. It looks like he must have had some issues. I tried to watch as much of that race as possible Wednesday night, but eventually I fell asleep. It was that darn California time getting to me.
Yeah, it went on in the wee hours of the morning. So
yeah,
it was definitely exciting to see all. There's a lot of talent in that race, a lot of names. Not just names, but talent. And it's cool to see that many drivers go out and take part of that event.
Kind of getting ready for the indoor season, and obviously they have Turkey Night coming up. But, yeah, it should be leading into a really, really good indoor season with Gateway and Chili Bowl.
Lots of midget racing coming up over the next couple of months. And if you're going to Gateway, you've got the modifieds and late models too. I was watching the hype video for that yesterday. Looks like Should be another exciting event at Gateway over in St. Louis. All right. Well, having said all of that, we've got another awesome interview this week that went really well. We're excited for you guys to hear it. So we're just going to dive right in to our interview on episode 32 of the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast with Carson Macedo. Today on the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast, we are joined by the driver of the Kyle Larson #2 World of Outlaw 410 Sprint Car, Rookie of the Year on the World of Outlaw Tour 2019, Mr. Carson Macedo. How are things going with you today?
And it's going well. Just actually headed back to the shop. We're kind of at the end of the season where we're running some non-wing stuff back here at home at Tarleton Motorsports. So organizing a seat to be put in the non-wing sprint car so that we can go racing at Turkey Night.
I was going to ask where you're spending your time right now, or if you're East Coast, West Coast, somewhere in between.
Yeah, so typically, the month of November before I head to Australia in early December, I get to spend at home with my family in California. So that's pretty nice. I don't really get much time at home anymore these days, so it's definitely good to get home and not only see my family, but do a little bit of racing back here on the West Coast with Paul Baines, Tyrone, and all these guys that work here at Tarleton Motorsports. That kind of really got me started in sprint car racing in the beginning.
Can you kind of talk us through your sprint car career?
Yeah, so I started racing for my dad when I was 4 or 5 years old in California, racing micro sprints, actually junior sprints. They're little 100cc small scale sprint cars. And pretty much from there, I think when I turned 9 or 10 years old, my dad bought me a micro restricted 600, which is kind of the limited class for younger kids that are moving up through the ranks of the micro scene. And then shortly after that, my dad actually sold his business and built a house in Lemoore there in the country. And that kind of just set us back a little bit to where it was just tough financially to keep racing the way we were. So pretty much when I was like 12 or 13, my dad sold all of our micro stuff, and I actually drove for a guy named Kyle Evans for a couple of years in the micros. And then when I turned 14, I think I actually was 15. I think it was right when I turned 15, the Tarleton family put me in their 360 wing sprint car here on the West Coast, and I ran, probably 15, 20 races that first year. And the year following that, I think we ran, 40, 50 races. They actually hired a full-time mechanic for my team. And then at that time, Tommy Tarleton was still racing a little bit also. So we kind of had like a 2-car team running through California. And then, man, after that, it just kind of took off. Like I raced a little bit more that next year. I ran some more 410 stuff. And the year after that, we ran the King of the West series, which is kind of like our all-star circuit of champions that we have out here on the West Coast, and we're able to win the championship. And because of that, and everything that had happened that year, the Tarleton family paid for me to go race a midget for Keith Kids Motorsports. I moved out to Indiana in 2016, and that year I ran a lot of sprint car stuff. Primarily in Ohio. I ran for Craig and Les Mintz with the Linders family, working on the car, throughout the week and then on the weekends as my mechanics. So I ran a lot of cars hit or miss that year also, just whenever I could, whatever I could get in. And then at the end of that year in 2016, I actually met Joe Gertie, linked up with him to race at the World Finals in Charlotte, and honestly struggled. But for whatever reason, they hired me that following year, and we kind of ran a 50 to 60, race schedule all over, kind of wherever we wanted, hit or miss. Any races that we thought we could go to and do well at. And then last year, we took the challenge of trying to run the full All-Star Champions deal with the 3G car, and I did fairly well. Ran, I think, second in driver's points, and had a pretty good year. And then in the middle of that year, I was able to drive the 41 car at Knoxville for JJR after the unfortunate situation that they were in with Jason. and just a pretty cool deal, man. I was honored to drive that car, and not too long before that, I was at Ohio Speed Week and kind of inked a deal together to race for KLR that following year. So, now, Kyle hired Joe Gertie and myself together, and after a year, we completed the World of Outlaw Tour and won some races, and were able to claim Rookie of the Year, and I thought we had a somewhat successful season. So, that's my story, and that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
It's definitely been a lot of fun to watch the last couple of years, especially having you here in Ohio, and then watch you travel back across the nation with the World Outlaws. But can we tell us about what it was like when you made that trip out to Ohio and the transition from California to Ohio? We asked Kyle about this a couple of months ago too. What are the things that were different about racing West Coast to being here full time in Ohio?
Yeah, so it's just a little bit of a different level. It's a different mindset that people have in the Midwest. That sprint car racing is something that can be done, on weekdays and all throughout the week. So it's just a different mindset. People out here on the West Coast, it's all weekend racing, and it's really hard to make a living doing it out here in California. So because of that, a lot of us, young guys that want to try and make a living at it, have to move out to Ohio, Pennsylvania, or Indiana, or one of those places. So, and it was great. Like, I thought that the transition was really good for me. The Ohio tracks are somewhat small for the most part, other than Eldora. Small bull rings. They do get quite a bit. Our racetracks out here in California get slick. Like, I think the mentality is that, we just race on wide open, hooked up tracks all the time. That's not really true. When the World of Outlaws come out to California, I think that's a lot of the reason why it gets that rap or that mentality, because they come out here in March where it's so cold and early in the year and so much moisture still in the air, and so then the tracks are typically more on the wet side at that time of year, and so I think that's why it kind of gets that orientation to that. That's how it always is. But we still get slick racetracks. Typically, our racetracks have something to lean on, so that's probably the biggest difference. Sometimes you go to Attica, or I know that a lot of people say like old Fremont. Fremont nowadays, I feel like is just like the California track, but the old Fremont, or typically they get so slick to where there's no cushion or anything, and it's just like glass. So it was a little bit of a transition, but man, I had really good people in my corner. With the Linders family, obviously you see they've done a really good job with a few drivers that have come out, from my side of the country, and being able to come out there. Buddy Kofoid and like my buddy DJ Neto raced it for Ed Neumeister a little bit with the Linders family, and I just think it's they've done a really good job of making that transition easier. I mean, they make you feel like part of the family. They obviously are good mechanics in that region, and do a really good job with everything they do. So that part of it made it easy for me. I also, driving for Craig and Les Mintz, I mean, they were incredible people. They took me in, and it really made me feel like I was, had been there for years, So it was awesome, though, man. I would say the transition is pretty reasonable for a guy that comes from California, I think. I mean, you go out there and, just drive as hard as you can, and I think whatever happens, happens. But as a whole, I feel like it's just a little bit of a different level. We have really good racers and drivers out here in California, but not quite as many that are going to do it for a living. You see a lot of guys, in that area have that dream because they see it so close, where out in California, I mean, the only way you can really make it happen is if you move all the way across the country, and a lot of people just, aren't willing to do that.
You kind of mentioned Buddy Kofoid there and DJ Neto that ran for the Linders. So are there any other guys out there that you think could maybe come out to Ohio that we may not know about and join as what we call the Linders California Orphanage out here?
Yeah, who are we getting next?
Yeah, so I would say, I would say Buddy will probably race the 11 a little bit more next year. I know he's got some other stuff going on, but it sounds like